Well, welcome to Tech HR 2019. It's great to be back. It's great to be back in India. You know, for the last decade and a half, I've made a couple trips a year to India, and it's amazing the energy and excitement that you see year after year as we start to really talk about advancements in technology and in human resources. Digital transformation, digital enablement of technology is growing by leaps and bounds. What we've seen over the last decade is an amazing increase in the ability of organizations to try to predict what's going on in the talent space. As an industrial psychologist, of course, I'm very interested in these things for multiple reasons. Primarily because assessment is about the nature of human nature, as is personality. So what I'd like to talk about today is, are these advancements bright and shiny? Will they stay bright and shiny for 15 to 20 years? Or are they a bunch of BS? Is it made up by the technology firms and by the physicists and the mathematicians, really to just increase our widgets and gadgets that we have at our expense and disposal? What I'd like to do is take a contrary view, so I'll start with the end. I actually believe that AI, machine learning, big data is very positive for the field. However, as other speakers have talked about this morning, the question is, how do we humanize that? How do we bring it to reality to where employees see the benefit and feel increased in terms of their value and their engagement in the organization? Dave, what are you doing, Dave? If you remember from the movie 2001, which was actually created back in 1968, we had the promise of HAL 9000, the first intuitive self-learning robot. What's interesting when you think about this, and you think about the way that technology has transformed the world, all I have to do is look at Tech HR. 3 years ago when I came to Tech HR, there were very few vendors or participants in the exhibit space that talked about assessment. No one was talking about AI, no one was talking about machine learning, and we sure weren't talking about deep neuro-linguistic programming. My, how has that changed? Just a quick tour this morning, I saw 22 different stands that use the word AI or machine learning. What do we normally think about when we see those things? Is it a marketing ploy? Is it a gimmick? Is it something that people are used to try to drive a conversation? Or as our good friend Leo said, when I hear our AI does X, Y, Z in a sales pitch, what I tend to do is I mentally replace the word with our team of outsourced workers, quote, quote, working very hard behind the scenes, and a few hard-coded algorithms does X, Y, Z. So how much of these things are actually being baked into the technology that people are using today versus how much of it is funding from venture capitalists and private equity trying to drive the value of organizations over time? You know, what's interesting is we do have Siri, we do have Alexa, but unlike HAL, neither of those two systems have learned how to purge us of unproductive employees that are just sucking the oxygen out of the room. Are we at the point of neurocognition? Are we at the point where our HR teams can sweep in and make immediate corrections to a hiring manager's bad mistake? Just like the 2002 movie Minority Report, can they descend on ropes and stop you from hiring someone who's not going to be successful in the organization? No, we're not quite there yet, but technology is helping us identify trends in the data, specifically in the recruitment space. Where do we best find applicants or candidates that may or may not be actively seeking a new role within the organization? The interesting thing I think too about Minority Report is just simply the consequences. And the movie itself, and we've talked a little bit about this morning, what are the ethics? What are the ethics of machine learning and AI and big data and how they impact people's lives and their careers? I think we have to stop and ask the question, is the hiring process in most organizations currently broken? To answer that question, I think you have to look at it from three perspectives. You have to look at it from the perspective of the organization, of the job seeker, and of, unfortunately, big tech and HR. From an organizational perspective, yes, organizations want more streamlined, cost-efficient, driven systems that provide them the best possible talent. However, even with those systems in place, what do we continue to see them do? Make mistakes. That's because we're all just wonderful judges of character, correct? No, I don't think so. We wouldn't have the divorce rate, especially in the U.S., if we were really good at judges of character. The other thing that we see is the perspective of the employee or the job seeker, the participant. Yes, participants want fairness above and beyond. You look at all the job surveys and all the surveys of hiring processes, fairness and equity is the number one thing that people are seeking in the employment process. Some of the work that we're doing with AI, with big data, with machine learning, has the potential to add fairness, to be more blind to the individual, to be more blind to their race, ethnicity, their gender, their age, the clothes they wear, how they shake someone's hand, or the tone of their voice. The challenge with that is, so far, what we've seen is a lot of black box systems that don't open up and expand to allow people to view on the inside what's really going on. And then there's the perspective from the tech industry that has found a ripe target in HR. Well, the tech industry, of course, is going to tell us that everything's broken, and if we'll increase our budget by tenfold, they have plenty of solutions that will help solve the problem. The challenge is, what type of actual data do they really have? Because remember, assessment, being an assessment expert, assessment has a job to do, and that job is to predict real-world performance. I know this may be hard to read for some of you in the back, but let's start with AI, because I look at AI as really encompassing both big data, machine learning. People use the word interchangeably. We got a good definition this morning of deep learning. But what you see is AI has branching scenarios. Whether or not you're using it to actually make key decisions, are you telling the system to look for something? What I would suggest to you is that HR is actually engaged more in deep learning. Why? Because with deep learning, yes, we're looking for patterns. Yes, we're asking the system or telling the system what to look for. And then third, we're wanting to do this in terms of a network. Sounds to me like things like Tinder, Badoo, other types of social matching applications. And I think we can take a lot of learnings from those as well. A lot of learnings in terms of what are networks of people. However, what I'd suggest to you, though, is doing that is nothing new. John Holland, a famous psychologist, back in the 40s, started talking about career types and how people that have different values and interests, different motivations, tend to pull together and join the similar societies in terms of careers and occupations. Breaking down deep learning. Deep learning is a natural output from big data, and there's nothing wrong with it. What's interesting is how big data is being used. And our speakers this morning in our keynotes talked about different applications, whether it be from market research, whether it be looking at trends in automation, whether it be in supply chain. Again, it's about seeking to report on the interconnected databases. It really is advancing human progress. One of the key areas is in food safety and disease research, tracking back to patient 0 or patient X, tracking salmonella poisoning in processed foods, etc. From an HR perspective, what we're finding is it is promising, but it's not always relevant. I was working with a beverage manufacturing company. Their CHRO said to me, Ryan, it's really interesting. All of our leaders, at least our systems tell us, all of our leaders need to wear a shoe size of 9 or higher. Again, promising, maybe, if you want to start using a measuring device on your applicants for leadership, but it's not always relevant. The second thing is it tends to be more focused on recruitment, but is it really giving us better prediction? Where we see great promise is in learning and development. I had the opportunity to listen to a few of the startup pitches as well as talk to some of the other vendors here at the conference. And what we find is deep learning, looking at networks, people that are trying to work on similar skills, connecting those individuals, or serving up additional development opportunities for people is actually a very good use of this technology. However, much like the picture shows, you don't take a saw to kill a chicken. You don't take a hammer to kill a mosquito. Perhaps we have a big effort going on, which is great from a research and development perspective, but what upgrade is it really giving us at this point in time? If you went last night to the event, maybe you had an AI beer that learns, recipes that change and adjust to your taste, coming to your store near you. Obviously, this is in jest, but at the same point, at what point in time does AI actually become useful? Then there's gamification. Gamification is a hot topic. They confuse it with AI. Gamification is actually we're being told is important from a participant perspective. That is, if I don't entertain my participants, they might quit the process and drop out. Let's ensure a positive experience for everyone involved. What do we know about games? Well, there's a lot of research on game theory. Game theory is serious business. It's not just the business objective of taking a traditional pencil and paper or traditional cognitive task and giving it game-like activities. No, gamification is serious work. Grand Theft Auto, one of the fastest-selling video games ever produced, it cost $240 million to produce Grand Theft Auto. Don't worry, it made $800 million in the first 24 hours it was available for sale. However, the years of development and the teams that were working on it are much greater than what we see from firms promising to change the recruitment world using gamification that just digitizes traditional tasks. So where can gamification help and hurt us? Well, first of all, do we really want to communicate to the world that we're more concerned about people who won't complete our employment task than we are about having them on our payroll? What happens when you assign them a job that they don't like? Do you let them drop out? Are you afraid they're going to quit? Do you not push them to achieve their best? Work is not a game. So ring toss, blowing up balloons, throwing darts at a board, all using your keyboard and mouse, that might be nice if you're applying for a circus performer. There is an unproven reliance on metadata. However, again, where we're seeing a great advancement in the use of gamification is in learning and development. Humans like to do simulations. We want to try this. We want to practice. We really want to grow and develop. So the use in development activities is, I think, one of the key areas that gamification can help us the most. Touch briefly on neuroscience. We see a lot of individuals in the marketplace talking about neuroscience-based assessments. Well, that's interesting because the definition of neuroscience is the study of the nervous system. I don't know of anyone yet who's convinced a candidate to let them stick metal probes into their brain or into their spinal column to actually measure their neurological impulses. I guess what they're trying to say is they're focused on solutions that are at that unconscious level. So why does my eye twitch every once in a while? I don't know. But somebody's saying that eye twitch must mean that I'm not a very good communicator. Again, let's get real about this. It's hardwired. It's part of our anatomy physiology. When you ask people what do neuroscience-based tests look like, they often look like this. Simple mental rotation games, speed and agility games using a keyboard or a computer for input. Again, no one's being stuck into a scan machine. No one's being hooked up to electrodes. But rather what we're doing is we're taking traditional cognitive tests and giving them a new name, giving them some color, and or making them look a little bit more interactive. So why is neuroscience games a problem, and why should you try to avoid them? One is they're really focused just on reactivity versus actual brain activity. So what we find from this is if you follow the line of cognitive research on reaction time, it's not about individual differences. Reaction time is about measuring to a standard. So setting a standard for pushing the brake on a train or a locomotive as an example. Great place for a skill-based cognitive test, which again is being labeled as neuroscience. The other thing we know is these types of assessments are quite inconsistent. Why? Practice effect. I guarantee you I would be a horrible bowler right now. Perhaps if you give me 3 months, 6 months, many of you are laughing, it'd probably be about 9 years. Perhaps I could actually not have a foul when I actually throw the ball. Let's talk about profile matching. Again, another way people are talking about AI and talent acquisition. Basically, they're saying to you, let us come in and assess or look at your entire workforce. You tell us who's best, and we will clone them. We will create you a workforce of individuals that match your high-performing population. The challenge with that is the following. Most organizations don't know who their high performers are. You see that time and time again where actual objective performance data does not match actual supervisor rating. So your best salespeople are oftentimes rated as the worst employees. Why? They don't turn in their expense reports. They take too much time off. They don't let people know where they are or what they're doing. So again, because we can't define what actually constitutes employment in terms of success, how can we say let's clone it? The other thing that you risk with cloning individuals or profile matching is creating an army of the same. So losing out on individualization and the creativity that diversity brings to the workforce. So what does profile matching do for us? Well, it tells us that not all commonalities actually predict performance. So if I were to assess your organization and actually look at the correlations between job performance and assessment data, I would see variability. But what I would likely see is 2 or 3 key attributes that best predict performance over time. The other interesting part is it does take a lot of data. And I don't know of I know of a few organizations, one, that are doing it right, 2, that have been doing it long enough that they do have diverse archival data. Just think about what was happening in certain organizations where they were trying to clone employees, and what they ended up doing was causing more discrimination and causing less performance over the course of time. And then data mining, machine learning to maximize prediction. So this is data scraping. This is data scraping your Twitter, your TikTok, your Facebook, your Instagram. Yes, I know what TikTok is. I've got 2 teenage girls. I promised them I wouldn't do a little dance and have anybody record it. But this is a fully automated process. Perhaps this is for your passive candidates. The challenge is, again, what we've seen so far in most, and I say most because there are vendors that are doing it the right way. What they're simply doing is relating their big data scrapes to current assessment tools. So the correlation between your data scrape and assessment XYZ might be high, but that doesn't mean one for one, if you think about statistics, that it's going to actually predict job performance over the course of time. Because why are you able to predict that assessment tool? Again, without a good theory, without a good understanding of psychometrics and personality assessment, you actually don't know. So the artificial intelligence will help you find your next customer or your next employee, but what we really see is that it can emphasize irrelevant information. The other thing that we've seen is look at the published example of Google and of Amazon. So Google had engineers spending years trying to develop an AI solution that was data scraping for employment. And they publicly have stated they had to abandon that project. Why? Because of the adverse impact or the disparate treatment it had towards women. Why was that? Can't they just build that out? No, because the machine was learning on their current workforce, which unfortunately does not have the same number of high-performing women as men, because historically they haven't hired the same proportion of men and women. Sure, you can go in and you can manipulate the algorithms, you can manipulate things that are going on in the system, but you run into challenges every time because the machine continues to learn. The other thing you have with data mining is simply think one word or 2 words, Cambridge Analytica. And so the problem with data privacy and security, the focus you have on GDPR is going to cause organizations to run into continued problems. So what are the final thoughts, or not, because the story's not over? As I said in the beginning, I think all these technologies have a place in HR. But as our speaker said so magnificently this morning, it's also about the human connection. It's also about humanizing these services to where employees will actually engage and use them. Second, AI, big data, deep learning, they all have the potential to help us. They also have the potential to harm us further. We have to use our ethics. We have to use our morals to guide our best beliefs about the future. And bright and shiny can be cool until it rusts. So choose wisely. And I'll leave you with this. As I was flying over this last weekend, I read an article in Personnel Today. What's the next thing on the horizon? Genetic testing for employment. Same thing they're doing around Olympic athletes. Our genes predispose us to be faster, stronger, quicker reaction time. Why can't we start looking at genetics to determine who's going to be the most productive, the most engaged, and the most successful leader? Thank you very much.